Hey, my name's Liam. I'm 28, and I work as a construction worker in a small suburb just outside Seattle. My days are pretty straightforward. Wake up at 6, chug some black coffee from a thermos, hop in my beat-up Ford truck, and head to the job site. By afternoon, I'm covered in dust and sweat, framing houses or pouring concrete under the gray Washington sky. I rent a tiny apartment that's barely bigger than a garage with a kitchenette that smells like old takeout and a bed that creaks every time I shift. It's not much, but it suits me. I don't have a lot of money socked away, just enough to cover bills and grab a beer with the guys on Fridays. No fancy vacations, no big plans. I've gotten used to it. The quiet rhythm of a life that's simple, if a little empty. It's been 2 years since I last went on a date. Not because of some heartbreak that left me shattered or anything dramatic like that. I just got tired. Tired of the awkward small talk, the forced laughs, the way people size you up like you're a project they might take on if the foundation isn't too cracked. "What's your 5-year plan?" they'd ask, and I'd shrug because mine's more like a day-to-day survival guide. I've been ghosted, stood up, and politely let down more times than I care to count. Eventually, I stopped trying. Solitude felt easier, safer even. No expectations, no disappointments. That changed when Maya called. She's been my best friend since high school, the kind who sticks around through the rough patches without making a big deal out of it. We don't talk every day, but when we do, it's real. "Liam, you can't just fade into the background forever," she said over the phone, her voice half exasperated, half concerned. "You're turning into a hermit. Come on, one blind date. If it's a disaster, I'll buy you beer for a month. Deal?" I laughed it off at first, but she wouldn't let it go. Maya knows me too well, knows I've been dodging life more than living it. In the end, I agreed. Not because I thought it'd lead to anything, but because I ran out of excuses. What was the worst that could happen? Another awkward evening I'd forget by morning? The cafe was at the end of a quiet street in town, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and mismatched wooden tables. Soft yellow lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow that made everything feel a little less intimidating. The air smelled of freshly ground coffee beans with a hint of cinnamon from the pastries in the display case. I got there 10 minutes early, a habit from years on construction sites where showing up late means you're out of a job. I picked a table by the window, facing the door, easy to spot her, and if things went south, an easy escape route to the parking lot outside. I scrolled through my phone, half watching the door, half preparing my exit lines. "Nice meeting you, but I've got an early start tomorrow." Something polite, quick. The barista called out orders in the background, the hiss of the espresso machine punctuating the low hum of conversations around me. Then she walked in. Her name was Laura. I'd learn that soon enough. She paused just inside the door, taking a deep breath like she was steeling herself for battle. She looked about 30, with shoulder-length brown hair tucked behind one ear, and a tentative expression that scanned the room not with excitement, but caution. She wore a loose gray, long-sleeved shirt and wide-leg jeans, her posture slightly hunched as if trying to take up less space. Our eyes met and she gave a small nod before walking over. "Hi, you must be Liam," she said, her voice soft but steady as she sat down. Her smile was practiced, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes, polite but guarded. "Yeah, that's me. Laura, right?" I replied, extending a hand. We shook briefly, her grip firm but quick. The first few minutes were standard blind date fare. "What do you do?" I asked. She was a nurse at a local hospital specializing in burn care. "Sounds intense," I said. She nodded, asking about my job. I told her about the construction sites, the long hours, the satisfaction of seeing something solid rise from nothing. It was surface-level stuff, the kind that fills air without revealing much. Then, without warning, the conversation shifted. Laura glanced down at her sleeve, fiddling with the cuff for a moment. "Look," she said, her tone suddenly matter-of-fact, "I might as well get this out of the way." She rolled up her sleeve slowly, revealing a patchwork of scars, thick, raised lines of healed burns that twisted from her wrist up her arm, disappearing under the fabric toward her shoulder. They weren't faint or faded. They were raw in their permanence, a map of pain etched into her skin. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. But the cafe seemed to go silent around us. The clink of cups, the murmur of voices, all faded. "No one wants to date me, she said, her voice calm, almost detached, like she'd said it 100 times before. She held my gaze, waiting for the reaction, the pity, the excuse, the polite withdrawal. The words hung there, heavy and honest. I could hear the espresso machine steaming in the distance, the faint scrape of a chair across the floor. But in that moment, everything narrowed to her, to the bravery it took to lay that out so early, so unapologetically. She wasn't hiding. She was testing, giving me an out before things got complicated. I reached across the table gently, my fingers brushing the edge of her sleeve. Without a word, I pulled it back down, covering the scars again, not out of discomfort, but respect. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady, meeting her eyes. "And I think if I walked out now, that's what I'd regret for the rest of my life." She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for the lie, the hesitation. There was fear there, and wariness, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of something else. A question unspoken. "Are you sure?" In that instant, I knew this wasn't just a date anymore. It was a moment where someone had bared their deepest vulnerability, waiting to see if I'd run. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to. We sat there in silence for a few minutes after that. Not the awkward kind that begs for filler words, but the necessary kind. The one that lets the weight of what she'd just shared settle between us. The cafe's background noise filtered back in slowly. The low chatter of a couple at the next table, the barista grinding beans, the faint jazz playing over the speakers. Laura kept her eyes on her coffee cup, tracing the rim with her finger while I processed it all. I wasn't sure what to say next, but I knew pushing her wouldn't help. So I waited. Finally, she looked up, her expression softer but still guarded. "You really want to hear the story?" she asked, almost like she was giving me one last chance to bail. "Yeah," I said simply. "If you're okay with telling it." She nodded, taking a deep breath. It happened 4 years ago. I was 26, living in an old apartment building downtown Seattle with my parents. They were visiting from out of state. My mom had just retired and we were celebrating. It was a normal night. We had takeout, watched some bad TV. I went to bed early because I had a shift the next day. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed, like she'd told this tale before. To therapists, maybe, or well-meaning friends who didn't know how to respond. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the smoke alarm. At first, I thought it was a false one. Those things went off all the time in that building. But then I smelled it, the acrid burn of plastic and wood. The fire started in the unit below ours, electrical fault or something. It spread fast, too fast. She paused, her eyes distant, reliving it. I remember the heat first, like the walls were breathing fire. The hallway was already filled with smoke when I got out of my room. I yelled for my parents, but they were in the guest room farther from the door. I tried to get to them, but the flames were licking up the stairs. My arm caught on a burning railing as I ran down. "That's where most of this came from." She gestured vaguely to her sleeve. The pain was like nothing I'd ever felt, sharp and deep, but adrenaline kept me moving. I made it outside, screaming for help, but by the time the firefighters got in, it was too late for them. Laura's words hung there, raw but controlled. No tears, no tremor, just facts delivered with the detachment of someone who'd replayed the nightmare 1,000 times. "They didn't make it," she finished quietly. "I survived because I was closer to the exit. But for months after, I wished I hadn't. The burns covered my left arm and part of my shoulder, 3rd degree in places, skin grafts, infections, physical therapy that felt like torture. It took over a year before I could even lift a cup without pain shooting through me." I listened without interrupting, picturing it all. The chaotic night, the sirens wailing in the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, the hospital lights glaring down as doctors worked on her. "And the mirror?" I asked gently, remembering what she'd said earlier. She gave a wry smile, the first real one I'd seen. "That was the hardest part. For weeks, I avoided them. When I finally looked, it was like staring at a stranger. The scars aren't pretty. They're raised, discolored, twisted. I used to cover them with makeup, but it never worked. Eventually, I just stopped trying to hide from myself. But from everyone else? That's different. Now it was her turn to ask, "What about you? You seem like the type who listens more than he talks. Why are you here, really? On a blind date?" I leaned back, surprised at how easy it felt to open up. Maybe it was her honesty pulling it out of me. Grew up poor, right here in the suburbs. My dad was a mechanic, mom cleaned houses. We scraped by, but there was always that feeling of being half a step behind everyone else. Kids at school had new clothes, vacations, I had hand-me-downs, and summers working odd jobs. It stuck with me, that sense of not being enough. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness matching the memory. Relationships, they've come and gone. A few girlfriends in my 20s, but they always ended the same way. "You're a good guy, Liam, but I don't have ambition. But I'm too comfortable with simple. But I pull away before things get real because I'm used to people leaving when they see the cracks. So, yeah, I retreat first. Saves the hassle." We both fell quiet again, but this time it felt connected, like we'd uncovered a shared thread. Our loneliness wasn't about scars on the skin. It was about the deeper ones, the belief that no one would stick around long enough to see past them. Laura met my eyes. "So why are you still sitting here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought about it for a second, then answered honestly. "Because you're the first person in a long time who gets what it's like. Not just surviving, but figuring out how to live again. And maybe I need that reminder too." She nodded slowly, processing. Then, almost tentatively, she said, "Okay." We talked a little more after that, lighter stuff. Favorite coffee spots in Seattle. How she hated the constant rain but loved the fog rolling in off Puget Sound. But the heaviness lingered, a good kind, like we'd cleared space for something real. As the cafe started to empty, I glanced at my watch. It was getting late, the streetlights flickering on outside. "We don't have to call this a date," I suggested. "No pressure, no expectations. What if we just try being friends? Two people who don't want to disappear into the world alone." Laura considered it, her fingers tapping the table. Then she smiled, a small, genuine one this time. "I'd like that." We stood up, paid the bill, I insisted, she relented, and walked out into the cool evening air. The sidewalk was damp from an earlier drizzle, typical Seattle weather. We didn't hold hands or exchange numbers with promises of forever. But as we parted ways, her heading toward the bus stop, me back to my truck, I felt a shift. This wasn't an ending, it was the start of a path where, for once, neither of us had to walk it alone. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. After that first meeting, our friendship grew in small, unhurried steps, like the way fog rolls in off the sound. Slow and enveloping, without fanfare. We exchanged numbers as we left the cafe, but there were no immediate texts or calls. A couple of days later, I sent a simple message. "Hey, hope the week's treating you okay." She replied with a photo of a cloudy Seattle sky captioned, "Better than yesterday." That became our rhythm. Quiet check-ins, nothing forced. We started meeting up casually. The first time was at a park near my job site, one of those green spaces tucked between warehouses and the interstate, with benches overlooking a murky pond. I'd bring sandwiches from the deli down the street. She'd show up with coffee. We'd sit and talk about nothing heavy at first. The relentless rain, a funny patient story from her shift, how I once fell off a ladder at work and bruised my ego more than my tailbone. But gradually, the conversations deepened. She'd share snippets of her days at the hospital, how rewarding it felt to help burn victims navigate their new realities, but also how exhausting it was to relive her own trauma through them. One evening, after a long day on the site, I got a text from her. "Rough shift. Mind if we walk?" We met at a trail along the waterfront, the kind where joggers and dog walkers weave through the mist. She was quieter than usual, her long sleeves pulled down despite the mild weather. "A coworker made a comment today," she said eventually, her voice low. "Nothing mean, just, you must be so strong to deal with that every day." But it brought back all those stares from strangers on the street, the pity, the disgust. She went silent for a few days after that, no replies, no photos. I didn't push, I just sent a single message. "Here if you need." When she resurfaced, it was with an apology and a promise to explain over coffee. That's when I started to see the pattern. Her scars weren't just physical, they were a shield, a reminder of loss that made her pull back when vulnerability crept in. Laura still hid them religiously, always in long sleeves or scarves, even on warmer days. I'd catch her tugging at the fabric unconsciously, like it was armor she couldn't shed. I never brought it up directly, but I could tell it weighed on her. The self-doubt, the fear that one glimpse would send people running. It mirrored my own hesitations, the way I'd built walls around my simple life to avoid judgment. In her, I saw a reflection. We were both survivors, patching over cracks we thought made us unlovable. A few weeks in, I mentioned an event I was volunteering for, a charity build organized by a local foundation. We were constructing a small playground at a community center for kids recovering from burns, complete with shaded areas and soft surfaces to make it safe and welcoming. It was close to my heart. I'd lost a buddy on a job site to an accident years back, and helping felt like a way to give back. "You should come," I said casually over lunch one day. "It's this weekend, no pressure, but it'd be cool to have you there." Her face tightened immediately. "I don't know, Liam. Being around all those people, I'd just be the center of attention for the wrong reasons." She glanced at her sleeve, the implication clear. I nodded, not arguing. Later that night, I texted, "If you decide to go, I'll be right there with you the whole time. You don't have to be strong alone." It was honest, no heroics, just an offer to stand beside her. To my surprise, she showed up. It was a sunny Saturday morning at the community center, the air buzzing with volunteers hammering away and kids laughing from the sidelines. I spotted her walking up the path, and my breath caught. She was wearing a short-sleeved yellow tee, the first time I'd seen her arms fully exposed in daylight. The scars were stark under the sun, twisting lines of healed skin that told their story without words. Her posture was tense, arms crossed at first, but she met my eyes and managed a small wave. "Hey," I said, walking over and giving her a quick, reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "Glad you came." She exhaled, glancing around. A few adults noticed, their gazes lingering before politely averting. But the kids, they didn't care about subtlety. A group of them, bandaged or scarred themselves, swarmed her almost immediately. "Whoa, your arms look like mine," one little boy exclaimed, holding up his own bandaged hand. They touched her scars curiously, asking questions without judgment. "Did it hurt? How did you get so cool looking?" Laura froze, her eyes darting to me in panic. I nodded encouragingly, mouthing, "You've got this." She knelt down slowly, her voice shaky at first. "It did hurt a lot. But you know what? It's like being a fire princess in a story. I fought the flames and came out stronger." The kid's eyes widened, and she spun a tale about a fire princess who turned her scars into badges of bravery. They hung on every word, laughing and asking for more. By the end, they were begging her to sign their casts or shirts, treating her like a hero. I stood back watching it unfold. In that moment, Laura wasn't hiding, she was shining. The sun caught her face as she smiled, real and unfiltered, and I realized how beautiful she was, not in spite of her scars, but because of the strength they represented. As the event wrapped up, she pulled me aside near the new swing set. "I never thought I'd do something like that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Exposing everything, literally. But having you there, it made it bearable. More than that, it made me want to try trusting again, even if it's scary." I took her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I believe we're patient enough for each other. We'll take it one step at a time, fast or slow, doesn't matter." Things seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm after the charity event. Laura and I kept meeting up, our conversations flowing easier now, laced with a quiet trust that hadn't been there before. She'd text me about a good day at the hospital, or I'd share a photo from the job site, a half-built frame against the skyline captioned "Progress." We weren't rushing anything, but the barriers were crumbling, one shared moment at a time. I found myself looking forward to her messages, to the way her laugh cut through the exhaustion of my days. But life doesn't stay smooth forever. It was early fall when the storm hit. Not the kind that brings rain, but the one that tests what you've built. I'd just gotten home from a grueling shift, my muscles aching from hauling lumber all day, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The message was short. "This is from the hospital. Laura listed you as a contact. She's been admitted. Exhaustion after a 36-hour shift. She's stable, but you should come." My heart dropped. I grabbed my keys and drove straight there, the Seattle traffic blurring into a haze of taillights and rain-smeared windows. The hospital was a maze of sterile hallways, the beep of monitors and murmur of nurses echoing off the walls. When I finally found her room, Laura was lying in the bed, her face pale under the fluorescent lights, IV drips snaking into her arm. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, fragile in a way that twisted something inside me. "Hey," I said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. Her eyes fluttered open and she managed a weak smile. "Liam, you didn't have to come." "Yeah, I did." I took her hand, careful of the scars, feeling the coolness of her skin. "What happened?" She sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "Just pushed too hard. Back-to-back shifts, a tough case with a kid who reminded me too much of everything. My body gave out." But as she spoke, her voice cracked, and tears slipped down her cheeks, not from the physical pain, but something deeper. "I'm so tired, Liam. Not just from work, from everything. The scars, the memories. I feel like I'm always one step from falling apart. And I hate that you have to see this, the weak side, the one that's not put together." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not here for a perfect version of you. I'm here for all of it." She turned her head away, her shoulders shaking. "What if you get tired of it? What if you realize I'm too broken, too much to handle? Everyone leaves eventually because I'm not whole anymore." Her words hit like a punch, echoing my own fears of not being enough. But I didn't pull away. Instead, I stayed, right there in that dim room, holding her as she cried. It wasn't dramatic, it was real, the kind of vulnerability that strips away pretenses. For the first time, she let the walls down completely, spilling out the fears she'd buried, the nightmares of the fire, the guilt of surviving when her parents didn't, the terror that she'd always be defined by her scars. I didn't try to fix it with words. I just listened, wiping her tears with the edge of my sleeve, telling her it was okay to not be okay. "I'm staying," I whispered. "Right here. You're not facing this alone." The next few days blurred together. I took time off work, juggling calls to my foreman while sitting in her room. I'd bring her herbal tea from the cafeteria, read aloud from a worn paperback I'd grabbed from the waiting area, some mystery novel that made us both chuckle at the plot twists. At night, when the hospital quieted, I'd stay until the nurses shooed me out, promising to be back first thing in the morning. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about showing up, proving that I meant what I'd said at the playground event. When she was discharged a week later, looking steadier but still fragile, I drove her home to her small apartment in a quiet neighborhood near the hospital. It was cozy, filled with books and plants, but there was a loneliness to it, the kind that comes from years of keeping people at arm's length. She hesitated at the door, then turned to me. "Come in? I want to show you something." I followed her inside, and she led me to a door at the end of the hall, a room she called her studio. She flipped on the light, revealing walls covered in canvases, abstract paintings of hands marked with scars, faces half-shadowed but illuminated by faint light, swirling colors that spoke of pain and resilience. "I started these after the fire," she explained, her voice soft. "They're not for anyone else, just a way to make sense of it all." I walked around taking it in, the raw emotion poured into every stroke. "These are incredible," I said. "They show strength, not brokenness." She stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Do you get scared? Of staying with someone who might never be fully healed? Someone like me?" I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "We all have our cracks, Laura. Mine aren't on the outside, but they're there. I'm not afraid of yours. I believe we're strong enough to walk this together, for the long haul." She nodded, a tear slipping free, but this time with a small smile. In that moment, the distance between us felt smaller, the connection deeper. We weren't fixed, but we were moving forward, hand in hand. That summer marked a turning point for us, quiet and unassuming, like the way the Seattle fog lifts without warning to reveal blue skies. Laura and I didn't need fireworks or grand declarations to make it official. We just started calling each other partners, lovers, whatever felt right in the moment. There was no elaborate proposal or social media announcement. We kept it between us, a private evolution from friends to something deeper. It felt natural, earned through the months of shared vulnerabilities and steady presence. One weekend in July, we drove out to the coast, packing a cooler with sandwiches and heading to a stretch of beach near Olympic National Park. The drive was peaceful, winding through evergreen forest with the windows down, salt air mixing with the scent of pine. Laura wore a short-sleeved tank top for the trip. Another first, her scars fully visible under the sun filtering through the trees. She caught me glancing at her arm once or twice, but instead of pulling away, she smiled. "It feels freeing," she said, flexing her fingers as if testing the air. At the beach, we spread out a blanket on the sand, the waves crashing rhythmically in the background. People milled around, families building sandcastles, couples walking hand in hand, but no one stared. Or if they did, Laura didn't notice. She laughed as we splashed in the shallow water, her joy unfiltered, radiant in a way that made my chest tighten. For the first time, she seemed truly at ease in her own skin, and seeing that, knowing I'd been part of the journey, made everything worth it. A few weeks later, I took her to meet my mom. We drove out to the small town where I grew up, about an hour east of Seattle, a place of rolling hills and old farms that hadn't changed much since my childhood. My mom's house was modest, with a wraparound porch and a garden full of wildflowers she'd planted herself. I was nervous, not sure how to introduce Laura or what questions might come up. But when we pulled into the driveway, Mom came out wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face lighting up. "You must be Laura," she said, pulling her into a hug without hesitation. No awkward pauses, no lingering looks at the scars. Instead, she stepped back, holding Laura's arms gently and said, "Liam's told me about you. You're strong as hell, girl. Come in. I've got pie in the oven." Laura's eyes welled up, but she blinked it away, whispering to me later, "She didn't even ask." That visit sealed something for us. Family wasn't about blood or perfection, it was about acceptance. Back in the city, our lives intertwined more deliberately. We joined a support group for burn survivors at a community center downtown, attending meetings every other week. Laura shared her story there, her voice growing steadier each time, inspiring others who were still hiding their pain. Inspired by the kids at the playground event, she started a small art class for children dealing with trauma. Once a month in a rented studio space, teaching them to turn their fears into colors on canvas. I'd tag along as her unofficial assistant, setting up easels, mixing paints, snapping photos of their proud creations. "You're my deputy photographer," she'd tease, handing me her phone, "and tea maker extraordinaire." My job on the construction sites remained the same. Long hours under the drizzle, hammering nails and mixing mortar. But now, at the end of the day, I had someone to come home to. I'd text her from the truck, "Heading back. Want takeout?" And she'd reply with a heart emoji or sometimes just "hurry home." It was those little routines that built our foundation, turning I into we. One evening, as the days started shortening, we sat on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. The air was crisp, carrying the faint chill of approaching autumn. Laura leaned her head on my shoulder, her scarred arm resting against mine, the wind gently brushing over her skin. "I used to believe no one could love someone like me," she said softly, her voice carrying over the distant hum of traffic. "Not really, not with all this." She traced a finger along one of the raised lines on her forearm. I turned to her, pulling her closer. "And now?" She smiled, that genuine one I'd come to cherish. "Turns out it just takes one person willing to stay. One who sees the scars but chooses the person behind them. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think possible." I kissed the top of her head, feeling the warmth of the moment settle deep. "We don't have to be perfect," I said. "We don't need promises of forever scribbled on paper. We just need to keep showing up, keep being real with each other every day. That's enough for me." We watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, the city fading into dusk. In that quiet, I knew, Happiness wasn't about erasing the storms we'd weathered. It was about facing them together, emerging stronger, and refusing to let go when life tested us most. After all the pain, the doubts, the fears, true love and peace had found us, not in spite of our broken pieces, but because we'd learned to hold them for each other.